The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in Coronado, California. Colonel Marcus Richardson adjusted his combat uniform and checked his watch. As the newly appointed liaison between Army Special Operations and Navy SEAL training programs, he had a reputation to maintain. At 52, Richardson had climbed the military ladder through sheer determination and an unwavering belief in traditional military hierarchy. The shooting range stretched out before him like a testament to precision and discipline. Steel targets gleamed in the distance, positioned at various ranges from 50 to 800 meters. The facility boasted some of the most advanced training equipment in the world, designed to push elite soldiers to their absolute limits. Richardson had requested this tour to evaluate potential cross-training opportunities between Army Rangers and Navy SEALs. "Colonel, we're ready for the demonstration," announced Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, the range officer. Morrison was a decorated SEAL with 15 years of combat experience, his weathered face telling stories of countless missions in hostile territories. He gestured toward a group of SEALs preparing their weapons nearby. Richardson nodded approvingly. These were his kind of soldiers, hardened, disciplined, and battle-tested. Each SEAL had earned their place through the grueling basic underwater demolition SEAL training, surviving a dropout rate that exceeded 80%. They moved with the confidence that came from knowing they belonged to the world's most elite fighting force. The demonstration was impressive. SEAL marksmen engaged targets at various distances, their shots precise and methodical. Richardson observed their technique, noting the controlled breathing, steady grip, and smooth trigger pulls. These men represented years of training and millions of dollars in military investment. As the last SEAL finished his run, Richardson was preparing to discuss integration protocols with Morrison when he noticed someone approaching the firing line. A woman in civilian clothes walked confidently toward the range safety officer. She appeared to be in her early 30s, of average height with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her clothing was unremarkable: jeans, a simple t-shirt, and worn hiking boots. "Excuse me," she said to the range officer, her voice clear and polite. "I'd like to use the range for some practice shooting. I understand civilians can request access with proper credentials." The range officer looked uncertain. Civilian access to military facilities required extensive paperwork and approval from multiple levels of command. Richardson stepped forward, his curiosity piqued by this unusual request. "Ma'am, this is a restricted military training facility," Richardson said, his tone carrying the authority of his rank. "Civilian access requires advance approval through proper channels. I'm afraid you'll need to use a commercial range." The woman turned to face him, her expression remaining calm and respectful. "I understand the protocols, sir. I have the necessary clearances and permissions." She reached into a small backpack and produced a folder containing official documentation. Richardson examined the papers with growing surprise. The clearances were legitimate, signed by officials at the highest levels of the Pentagon. Sarah Chen, according to her identification, had been granted special access for evaluation and demonstration purposes. The authorization came from the Office of the Secretary of Defense himself. "These appear to be in order," Richardson admitted reluctantly. He had never encountered a civilian with such high-level military access. "However, this range is currently being used for elite military training exercises. Perhaps you could return at a more convenient time." Sarah smiled politely. "I appreciate your concern, Colonel. The documentation specifically allows for concurrent use during training exercises. I understand you're evaluating cross-training opportunities between different special operations units." Richardson's eyebrows rose. This woman clearly had access to information that should have been classified. His initial curiosity was rapidly transforming into suspicion and annoyance. Who was she, and what was her connection to military special operations? "Miss Chen," he said, emphasizing the civilian title, "while your paperwork may be legitimate, I have concerns about safety protocols. This range is designed for military professionals with years of specialized training. The targets and courses we use here are significantly more challenging than civilian shooting ranges." Several SEALs had finished their equipment maintenance and were now observing the conversation with interest. Richardson was aware of their attention and felt the need to demonstrate his authority. These elite soldiers needed to see that he maintained proper standards and didn't allow military facilities to be compromised by civilian interference. I understand your concerns, Sarah replied. Perhaps I could demonstrate my proficiency with some basic exercises first. I'm familiar with range safety procedures and military shooting protocols. Richardson exchanged glances with Lieutenant Commander Morrison, who shrugged slightly. The paperwork was legitimate, and they couldn't legally refuse access. However, Richardson saw an opportunity to make his point about military standards while satisfying the woman's request. Very well, he said with a slight smile. We'll allow you to attempt some basic shooting exercises. However, I must insist on proper supervision and safety protocols. Lieutenant Commander Morrison will oversee your activities. Richardson's smile widened as he continued. In fact, since you're so confident, perhaps you'd like to try the same course our SEALs just completed. It's a standard qualification exercise, nothing too challenging for our professionals here. He gestured toward the range where steel targets were positioned at various distances. The course required engaging 12 targets in sequence, starting at 50 meters and extending to 400 meters. Each target was a different size, representing various threat scenarios from close-quarters combat to long-range engagement. The course requires hitting targets in a specific sequence while moving between firing positions, Richardson explained. Our SEALs are expected to achieve at least an 85% hit rate within the time limit. It's designed to simulate real combat conditions. Sarah nodded thoughtfully as she examined the range layout. That seems reasonable. What's the time limit? 4 minutes, Morrison answered, including movement between positions and weapon handling. And what weapon system would I be using? Sarah asked. Richardson's smile became more pronounced. This was where civilian inexperience would become apparent. Standard issue M4 carbine with ACOG optic. Same configuration our SEALs use. Of course, if you're more comfortable with a civilian hunting rifle or something less challenging. The M4 will be fine, Sarah replied without hesitation. I'm familiar with the platform. Richardson nodded to Morrison, who retrieved a rifle from the arms room. The weapon was a current military configuration, equipped with advanced optics and accessories that required specific training to use effectively. Richardson watched as Sarah accepted the weapon and began a systematic inspection. Her handling of the rifle impressed Morrison immediately. She performed a proper safety check, verified the optic mounting, and tested the action with the smooth efficiency of someone thoroughly familiar with the weapon system. Her grip and stance suggested significant training and experience. Ammunition, she asked. Morrison provided a magazine loaded with 30 rounds of 5.56 ammunition. Sarah inserted the magazine, charged the weapon, and engaged the safety with practiced ease. She had performed these actions thousands of times before. Range is hot, Morrison announced, following standard safety protocols. Engage targets at will. Richardson positioned himself in the observation area, confident that this civilian would struggle with the military course. He had seen many civilians attempt military-style shooting exercises, and they invariably overestimated their abilities. The stress of timed fire, combined with movement and multiple target engagement, typically overwhelmed even experienced recreational shooters. Sarah approached the first firing position and assumed a solid shooting stance. Richardson noticed that her position was textbook perfect, feet properly spaced, body weight slightly forward, rifle mounted consistently in the shoulder pocket. She was clearly not a novice, but Richardson remained confident that military precision training would prove superior. The timer started, and Sarah immediately engaged the first target at 50 meters. The steel plate rang with the distinctive sound of a solid hit. She smoothly transitioned to the second target, another clean hit. Richardson's confidence began to waver slightly as she continued engaging targets with mechanical precision. Her movement between firing positions was fluid and efficient. She maintained proper muzzle discipline while transitioning, kept her eye on potential threats, and established stable shooting positions quickly. These were skills that took military personnel months to develop. By the halfway point of the course, Richardson realized that Sarah was not just competent. She was performing at a level that matched or exceeded his SEALs. Every shot had found its mark, and her time management was exceptional. The SEALs watching from the sideline were beginning to murmur among themselves. Sarah reached the final firing position, where she needed to engage targets at 300 and 400 meters. These long-range shots required significant skill and precise rifle handling. Richardson watched through binoculars as she adjusted her shooting position for the extended range. Her breathing pattern changed, becoming deeper and more controlled. She made a minor adjustment to her scope and settled into a rock-steady position. The first long-range shot rang out, followed immediately by the metallic clang of the distant target. The final target, positioned at 400 meters, was the size of a dinner plate. It represented the maximum effective range for most infantry engagements and required exceptional marksmanship skills. Sarah took extra time to establish her position, verify her sight picture, and control her breathing. The shot echoed across the range, and Richardson strained to see the distant target through his binoculars. The steel plate swung on its mount, indicating a solid hit. Sarah had completed the entire course without missing a single target. Morrison checked his stopwatch and announced the results. Time, 3 minutes 18 seconds, 12 targets, 12 hits, perfect score. Richardson stared in disbelief. The woman had not only completed the course successfully, but had done so faster than most of his SEALs while maintaining perfect accuracy. Her performance was exceptional by any standard. The SEALs on the firing line had fallen silent, clearly impressed by what they had witnessed. Several were exchanging glances and quiet comments about the civilians' shooting skills. Richardson felt his authority and credibility being questioned by these elite soldiers. "Impressive shooting," Morrison commented to Sarah as she safed her weapon. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Sarah handed the rifle back to Morrison and removed her ear protection. "Various places over the years. I've always enjoyed precision shooting as a hobby." Richardson approached, his mind racing to process what he had just witnessed. No civilian hobbyist could perform at that level without extensive professional training. There was clearly more to Sarah Chen than her documentation revealed. "Miss Chen," he said carefully, "that was certainly adequate shooting for a civilian. However, our SEALs regularly train on much more challenging courses. What you just completed is merely a basic qualification exercise." Sarah nodded politely. "I understand. Is there a more advanced course I could attempt? I'd hate to waste the opportunity to train on such excellent facilities." Richardson felt trapped by his own statements. He had implied that the course was basic, and now this civilian was calling his bluff. To maintain credibility with his SEALs, he needed to present a more challenging test. "Certainly," he replied, though his confidence was shaken. "We have an advanced marksman course designed for our most elite snipers. It involves multiple weapons systems, unknown distance targets, and time-pressure scenarios. However, I should warn you that it requires specialized equipment and training that civilians typically don't possess." "I'm willing to try," Sarah said simply. Richardson looked at Morrison, who was clearly intrigued by the woman's abilities. The SEAL officer was curious to see how far her skills extended. Against his better judgment, Richardson found himself agreeing to a more advanced demonstration. "Very well. Lieutenant Commander Morrison will set up the advanced course. I trust you understand that this will be significantly more challenging than what you just completed." As Morrison began preparing the range for the advanced exercise, Richardson pulled him aside for a private conversation. "What do you make of her?" he asked quietly. Morrison glanced back at Sarah, who was examining the distant targets through binoculars. "Sir, that was some of the best shooting I've seen from anyone, military or civilian. Her technique is flawless, and her familiarity with the weapon suggests extensive training. I'm curious to see what she can do with the advanced course." Richardson nodded grimly. He was beginning to suspect that this demonstration would not go as he had originally planned. Sarah Chen was clearly not an ordinary civilian, and her mysterious documentation suggested connections he didn't fully understand. The advanced course would involve multiple weapon systems, including precision rifles, carbines, and handguns. Targets would be placed at unknown distances, requiring the shooter to estimate range and make appropriate adjustments. Time pressure and physical stress would be added to simulate combat conditions. As Morrison and his team prepared the equipment, Richardson watched Sarah carefully. She appeared completely relaxed and confident, showing none of the anxiety he would expect from a civilian facing military-level challenges. Her calm demeanor only increased his suspicion about her true background. The SEALs gathered around to observe the advanced demonstration. Word had spread through the unit about the civilian woman who had just outshot their qualification scores. Richardson realized that his reputation and authority were now on the line. If Sarah continued to perform exceptionally, it would raise serious questions about his judgment and leadership. "The advanced course is ready, sir," Morrison reported. 3 weapon systems, unknown distance targets from 100 to 600 meters, physical movement requirements, and a 15-minute time limit. Richardson nodded and turned to Sarah. "Miss Chen, this course is designed for our most experienced special operations personnel. Are you certain you want to attempt it?" Sarah checked her watch and adjusted her ponytail. "Absolutely, Colonel. I appreciate the opportunity to challenge myself on such a professional range." Richardson felt a growing sense of unease. Something about this entire situation was wrong, but he couldn't identify exactly what was bothering him. Sarah's documentation was legitimate, her shooting skills were exceptional, and her demeanor suggested complete confidence in her abilities. As she prepared for the advanced course, Richardson realized that he had made a significant miscalculation. He had assumed that civilian inexperience would quickly become apparent under military standards. Instead, he was faced with someone who appeared to match or exceed the capabilities of his elite soldiers. The demonstration was about to begin, and Richardson had the uncomfortable feeling that he was about to learn something unexpected about Sarah Chen. Her mysterious background and exceptional skills suggested that this civilian woman had secrets that would soon be revealed. Lieutenant Commander Morrison stood beside a table displaying 3 different weapon systems, each representing a different aspect of military marksmanship. The setup was designed to test not just shooting accuracy, but tactical thinking, equipment familiarity, and adaptability under pressure. "The first station uses the M110 semi-automatic sniper system," Morrison explained, gesturing to a sophisticated rifle equipped with advanced optics. "Targets at unknown distances from 300 to 600 meters. You'll need to estimate range and make appropriate scope adjustments." Sarah examined the M110 with the same systematic approach she had used with the M4. The rifle was a precision instrument used by military snipers worldwide, requiring extensive training to operate effectively. She checked the scope mounting, tested the bolt action, and verified the safety mechanisms. "Second station uses the M4 carbine with iron sights only," Morrison continued. "Targets from 100 to 300 meters while moving between positions under time pressure." Richardson watched carefully as Sarah inspected the second rifle. Iron sight shooting required different skills than optic-assisted marksmanship. Without magnification or reticle assistance, shooters had to rely on fundamental techniques and natural ability. "The third station is handgun shooting with the M17 service pistol," Morrison concluded. "Multiple targets at various distances while navigating obstacle course elements." Sarah nodded as she examined the Sig Sauer M17, the military's newest service pistol. Her handling suggested familiarity with the weapon's controls and characteristics. Richardson noticed that her grip and stance automatically adjusted for the different weapon system. "Time limit is 15 minutes for the entire course," Morrison added. "You'll need to manage your time across all 3 stations while achieving minimum scores at each position." The SEALs gathered closer to observe the demonstration. Word had spread throughout the facility about the civilian woman who had dominated their qualification course. Several instructors and senior enlisted personnel had arrived to witness the advanced demonstration. "What are the minimum scores?" Sarah asked. Morrison consulted his clipboard. 70% hit rate at the precision rifle station, 80% with the carbine, and 60% with the handgun. These standards reflect the different difficulty levels of each station. Richardson felt more confident about these requirements. The advanced course had been designed by SEAL instructors to challenge their most experienced operators. Even elite military personnel occasionally failed to meet all 3 minimum scores within the time limit. "Are you ready to begin?" Morrison asked. Sarah stretched briefly and checked her gear. "Ready." "Range is hot. Begin when ready." Sarah immediately moved to the precision rifle station. She had decided to start with the most technically challenging portion while she was fresh and focused. The M110 was a heavier weapon than the M4, requiring different shooting techniques and positions. She assumed a prone position and began studying the distant targets through the rifle scope. The targets were positioned at unmarked distances, requiring her to estimate range using various reference points and optical techniques. This was a skill that took military snipers years to master. Richardson watched through binoculars as Sarah made minute adjustments to her scope. Range estimation was one of the most difficult aspects of precision shooting, requiring experience, training, and natural ability. Incorrect estimates would result in complete misses, even with perfect shooting technique. Her first shot rang out after nearly a minute of preparation. The distant target showed a clean hit, indicating accurate range estimation and precise shooting. She smoothly worked the rifle action and acquired the second target. The second target appeared to be positioned at a different range, requiring a new scope adjustment. Sarah took time to study the target, estimate distance, and make appropriate corrections. Her methodical approach impressed the observing SEALs. Shot after shot, she continued engaging targets with mechanical precision. Each target required individual analysis and scope adjustment, but her hit rate remained perfect. Richardson realized with growing unease that she was performing at a level that exceeded most military snipers. After completing the precision rifle station, Sarah quickly transitioned to the M4 carbine with iron sights. This station required rapid movement between firing positions while engaging targets at varying distances without optical assistance. Her movement was tactical and efficient. She maintained proper weapon handling while transitioning, kept her eyes focused downrange for potential threats, and established stable shooting positions quickly. These skills were typically developed through extensive military training. The iron sight shooting presented different challenges than the precision rifle work. Without magnification, distant targets were smaller and harder to acquire. The shooter had to rely on fundamental marksmanship principles and natural hand-eye coordination. Sarah's performance with iron sights was equally impressive. She engaged targets rapidly, but deliberately, taking just enough time to ensure accurate shots while maintaining the pace necessary to complete the course within the time limit. Richardson noticed that several SEALs were now taking notes and discussing her techniques. Her shooting fundamentals were textbook perfect, and her tactical movement suggested extensive professional training. The observation that this was merely a civilian hobbyist was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. At the halfway point of the course, Sarah had achieved perfect scores at both the precision rifle and carbine stations. Richardson checked his watch and realized that her time management was exceptional. She was ahead of schedule while maintaining perfect accuracy. The final station required handgun shooting while navigating obstacle course elements. This combined marksmanship with physical agility and tactical thinking. Shooters had to engage targets while moving, crouching, and shooting from unconventional positions. Sarah drew the M17 pistol and performed a quick function check. Her grip and stance immediately adapted to the handgun platform, suggesting extensive training with multiple weapon systems. The transition from rifle to pistol shooting required different muscle memory and techniques. The obstacle course included barriers, low crawl sections, and elevated positions. Targets were positioned to require shooting while moving, from cover, and at various angles. This simulated real-world tactical scenarios that military personnel might encounter. Sarah began the pistol course with controlled aggression. She moved quickly but deliberately, engaging targets as opportunities presented themselves. Her shooting positions were stable despite the movement requirements, and her accuracy remained consistently high. Richardson watched in amazement as she navigated the obstacles while maintaining perfect weapon control. Her muzzle discipline was flawless. Her trigger finger remained in the proper position during movement, and she followed all safety protocols instinctively. The final target required a challenging shot from an elevated position while partially concealed behind a barrier. This represented the type of real-world shooting scenario that special operations personnel trained extensively to master. Sarah assumed a supported firing position using the barrier for stability. She took time to establish a proper sight picture despite the time pressure, demonstrating the discipline that separated exceptional shooters from merely good ones. The final shot echoed across the range, followed by the distinctive sound of a successful hit. Sarah saved her weapon and looked to Morrison for her results. Morrison checked his scoring sheets with obvious amazement. Precision rifle station, 100%. Carbine station, 100%. Pistol station, 95%. Total time, 11 minutes 47 seconds. The SEALs erupted in spontaneous applause. Richardson stood in stunned silence as he processed the results. Sarah had not just passed the advanced course, she had achieved scores that would be exceptional for any military operator. Outstanding shooting, Morrison commented as he approached Sarah. Those are some of the highest scores I've ever recorded on this course. Where did you receive your training? Sarah handed the pistol back to Morrison and began removing her ear protection. I've been interested in shooting sports for many years. I've been fortunate to train with some excellent instructors. Richardson finally found his voice. Miss Chen, those scores are remarkable. However, our most advanced exercises involve additional stress factors that aren't present in controlled range conditions. He was desperately trying to maintain some sense of military superiority in front of his SEALs. The woman's performance had been so exceptional that it threatened everything he believed about civilian versus military capabilities. What additional factors? Sarah asked with genuine interest. Richardson looked to Morrison for support. The SEAL officer was clearly impressed by Sarah's abilities and curious to see how far her skills extended. Against his better judgment, Richardson found himself proposing even more challenging tests. Combat stress simulations, Richardson said. Physical fatigue, time pressure, and environmental factors that replicate real-world military operations. These exercises are designed to push our operators to their absolute limits. Sarah considered this thoughtfully. That sounds very interesting. Would it be possible to attempt such an exercise? Morrison stepped forward before Richardson could respond. We have a combat simulation course that includes all those factors. It's typically reserved for final qualification testing of our most experienced SEALs. Richardson realized that Morrison was now actively encouraging the demonstration. The SEAL officer was clearly intrigued by Sarah's abilities and wanted to see a full display of her skills. Richardson felt that he was losing control of the situation. The simulation course is quite intensive, Richardson warned. It involves physical challenges, stress inoculation, and complex shooting scenarios under extreme time pressure. Our failure rate is significant even among experienced military personnel. I understand the risks, Sarah replied. If it's possible to arrange, I'd be very interested in attempting the exercise. Richardson looked around at the assembled SEALs, all of whom were clearly eager to see the civilian woman attempt their most challenging course. He realized that refusing at this point would make him appear afraid of the comparison. Very well, he said reluctantly. Lieutenant Commander Morrison will set up the combat simulation course. However, I must insist on additional safety precautions given your civilian status. As Morrison began organizing the simulation setup, Richardson pulled him aside once again. What exactly are we doing here? He asked quietly. Morrison glanced back at Sarah, who was now surrounded by SEALs asking questions about her shooting techniques. Sir, I've never seen shooting like that from anyone, including our instructors. I'm curious to see how she handles the full combat simulation. This woman is making our elite personnel look like amateurs, Richardson hissed. Who is she really? Morrison shrugged. Her documentation checks out, sir. But you're right, nobody shoots like that without serious professional training. The combat simulation will tell us what we need to know. Richardson nodded grimly. The combat simulation was designed to break down even experienced military personnel. It combined physical stress, mental pressure, and complex shooting challenges in ways that revealed true capabilities. If Sarah was hiding something, the simulation would expose it. The course included sleep deprivation simulation, physical exhaustion challenges, complex decision-making scenarios, and advanced marksmanship tests. Participants had to demonstrate not just shooting skills, but tactical thinking, stress management, and adaptability under extreme pressure. How long will it take to set up? Richardson asked. About 30 minutes, Morrison replied. We'll need to activate the stress simulation equipment and prepare the scenario-based targets. Richardson watched Sarah chatting with his SEALs, discussing shooting techniques and equipment preferences. She seemed completely at ease with the elite military personnel, showing none of the deference he would expect from a civilian in such company. Several SEALs were now asking detailed questions about her shooting methods. Her responses demonstrated deep knowledge of ballistics, weapon systems, and tactical applications. Richardson realized that she was discussing topics that most civilians would never encounter. "Sir," one of the SEALs approached Richardson. "The lady knows more about some of our equipment than our regular instructors. She just explained a technique for long-range shooting that I've never heard before." Richardson's suspicion continued to grow. Sarah Chen was clearly not an ordinary civilian, despite her documentation. Her knowledge, skills, and confidence suggested a background that she wasn't revealing. As Morrison's team prepared the combat simulation course, Richardson made a decision. After the simulation, regardless of the results, he would demand answers about Sarah's true identity and background. Her presence at the facility was raising too many questions to ignore. The next phase of the demonstration would either confirm his suspicions about her hidden background or finally reveal the limits of her capabilities. Either way, Richardson was determined to get to the truth about this mysterious woman who was systematically dismantling everything he believed about military superiority. The combat simulation would be the ultimate test. If Sarah passed this challenge, Richardson would have to acknowledge that she possessed skills that rivaled the world's most elite military operators. The implications of such a revelation would force him to completely reconsider his assumptions about civilian capabilities and military exclusivity. As the preparation continued, Richardson found himself both dreading and anticipating the results. Part of him wanted Sarah to fail, confirming his beliefs about military superiority. Another part was genuinely curious to see just how far her remarkable abilities extended. The stage was set for a demonstration that would challenge everything Richardson thought he knew about elite military training and civilian limitations. The combat simulation facility resembled a complex maze of concrete barriers, steel structures, and electronic equipment. Morrison's team had transformed the range into a realistic battlefield environment complete with smoke machines, sound systems, and stress-inducing obstacles. The setup was designed to push elite military operators beyond their normal capabilities. "The simulation begins with physical exhaustion," Morrison explained to Sarah as they walked through the course. "You'll complete a series of demanding physical challenges designed to elevate your heart rate and stress levels before any shooting begins." Richardson observed the preparation with mixed emotions. The combat simulation had been developed over years of trial and error, incorporating lessons learned from actual combat operations. Even experienced SEALs occasionally failed to complete the course successfully. The physical challenges included tire flips, rope climbs, heavy equipment carries, and obstacle navigation. These exercises were designed to simulate the exhaustion that military personnel experienced during extended combat operations. Fighting effectiveness under physical stress separated elite operators from conventional soldiers. "After the physical phase, you'll navigate the shooting course while dealing with multiple stress factors," Morrison continued. "Loud noises, smoke, time pressure, and decision-making challenges that require tactical thinking under pressure." Sarah examined the course layout carefully, mentally rehearsing her approach to each obstacle and shooting position. Her systematic planning demonstrated the type of tactical thinking that Richardson associated with experienced military personnel. The shooting challenges included multiple weapon systems, moving targets, hostage scenarios, and precision shots under time constraints. Participants had to make split-second decisions about target engagement while managing ammunition, equipment, and tactical positioning. "Sound levels will exceed 120 decibels, Morrison warned. "Smoke will limit visibility to less than 10 meters in some areas. You'll have simulated equipment failures and must adapt your tactics accordingly." Richardson watched Sarah's reaction to these warnings. Most civilians would show obvious concern about such extreme conditions, but she simply nodded and asked practical questions about safety protocols and equipment specifications. "Time limit for the entire course is 20 minutes, Morrison added. "Failure to complete within the time limit results in automatic disqualification, regardless of shooting performance." The assembled SEALs had grown into a substantial crowd. Word of Sarah's exceptional performance had spread throughout the facility, attracting instructors, support personnel, and off-duty operators. Richardson realized that the demonstration had become a major event. "Are you ready to begin?" Morrison asked. Sarah stretched and checked her equipment one final time. "Ready." "Begin the physical phase on my signal," Morrison announced over the facility intercom. "Course timer starts now." Sarah immediately sprinted to the first obstacle, a series of heavy tires that had to be flipped end over end across a 50-meter distance. The tires weighed over 100 pounds each, requiring significant strength and technique to move efficiently. Richardson watched through binoculars as Sarah attacked the tire-flipping exercise with impressive intensity. Her technique was excellent, using her legs and core strength to generate power while maintaining a sustainable pace. Most civilians would struggle to move the tires at all. The second obstacle required climbing a 20-foot rope using only arm strength. This exercise challenged upper body power and grip strength while building the type of exhaustion that affected shooting accuracy. Sarah ascended the rope smoothly, demonstrating the functional fitness that characterized elite military personnel. Heavy equipment carries came next: sandbags, ammunition cans, and water containers that had to be transported across varied terrain while maintaining speed. Sarah's approach was tactical and efficient, using proper lifting techniques and load distribution that minimized energy expenditure. Richardson checked his stopwatch and realized that Sarah was maintaining an exceptional pace through the physical challenges. Her conditioning appeared to match or exceed that of his SEALs, despite her civilian status. His suspicions about her true background continued to intensify. The obstacle course navigation required climbing, crawling, jumping, and rapid direction changes while carrying equipment. Sarah moved through the obstacles with tactical awareness, maintaining weapon readiness positions even during physical movement. By the time she completed the physical phase, Sarah was breathing heavily but remained focused and controlled. Richardson noted that she showed signs of exertion without appearing overwhelmed or disoriented. Her stress management was exceptional. "Physical phase complete," Morrison announced. "Time 8 minutes 32 seconds, proceeding to combat simulation." The simulation environment activated with overwhelming intensity. Speakers began projecting the sounds of gunfire, explosions, and shouting voices at volumes that made normal communication impossible. Smoke machines filled the air with dense gray clouds that limited visibility dramatically. Sarah entered the simulation area and immediately adapted her movement to the reduced visibility conditions. She maintained tactical spacing from obstacles, kept her weapon in a ready position, and demonstrated the situational awareness that came from extensive training. The first shooting challenge appeared through the smoke, multiple targets at varying distances with limited engagement time. Sarah had to identify threats, prioritize targets, and engage them accurately while managing ammunition and position. Richardson watched through thermal imaging equipment as Sarah systematically engaged each target with precise shots. Despite the noise, smoke, and time pressure, her accuracy remained exceptional. She was performing at a level that matched the facility's best operators. Moving targets came next, requiring Sarah to track and engage threats while navigating obstacles and managing equipment. This challenge combined marksmanship with tactical movement and decision-making under extreme stress. Her target tracking was flawless, leading moving targets appropriately and maintaining accuracy despite the challenging conditions. Richardson realized that this type of shooting required extensive practice and professional instruction to master. The hostage scenario presented the most complex challenge, identifying hostile targets while avoiding civilian casualties in a crowded environment. Sarah had to make split-second decisions about target engagement while managing multiple threat vectors. She approached the scenario methodically, using cover effectively while gathering information about target locations and civilian positions. Her tactical thinking was sophisticated, demonstrating understanding of complex engagement principles. When she finally engaged the hostile targets, her shots were precise and decisive. She neutralized all threats while avoiding any civilian casualties, a result that required exceptional marksmanship and tactical judgment. Equipment failures were simulated through electronic controls that disabled weapon systems or created ammunition feeding problems. Sarah had to diagnose and resolve these issues while maintaining tactical awareness and time management. Her equipment troubleshooting was efficient and effective. She cleared simulated malfunctions quickly and adapted her tactics when weapon systems became unavailable. This adaptability suggested extensive experience with equipment failures under stress. Richardson watched the timer countdown as Sarah approached the final challenge, a precision shot that required engaging a small target at maximum range while dealing with simulated wind effects and time pressure. The shot was technically demanding under ideal conditions, but nearly impossible given the stress factors and environmental challenges of the simulation. Even experienced military snipers occasionally missed this target during qualification testing. Sarah assumed a stable shooting position and began her firing sequence. Despite the noise, smoke, and time pressure, she took the necessary time to establish proper sight alignment and breathing control. The shot rang out just seconds before the time limit expired. Richardson strained to see the distant target through his observation equipment, waiting for confirmation of the hit. "Target hit," Morrison announced over the intercom. "Course complete with 43 seconds remaining." The simulation environment shut down, and the smoke began to clear. Sarah emerged from the course looking exhausted but composed, having completed one of the military's most challenging training exercises successfully. The assembled SEALs erupted in spontaneous applause and cheers. Many of them had failed this course during their own training, and they recognized the exceptional performance they had just witnessed. Morrison approached with his scoring sheets, clearly amazed by the results. Perfect score on all shooting challenges. Time, 19 minutes 17 seconds. Outstanding performance under all stress factors. Richardson stood in stunned silence as he processed the implications of what he had witnessed. Sarah had not just completed the combat simulation. She had achieved scores that would be exceptional for any military operator, including his most experienced SEALs. "Miss Chen," Richardson said finally, his voice betraying his confusion and growing frustration, "your performance today has been remarkable. However, I find it difficult to believe that a civilian hobbyist could achieve such results without extensive professional training." Sarah accepted a bottle of water from one of the SEALs and took a moment to catch her breath before responding. "I appreciate the opportunity to train on such excellent facilities, Colonel. The courses were challenging and well-designed." Richardson's frustration was mounting. Sarah was clearly evading his questions about her background while demonstrating skills that suggested extensive military or law enforcement experience. Her documentation claimed civilian status, but her performance contradicted that classification. "Miss Chen," he pressed, "I must ask directly, what is your professional background? Your skills today exceeded those of many military professionals. Civilian shooting hobbyists simply don't perform at this level." The SEALs gathered closer, equally curious about Sarah's background. They had witnessed something exceptional and wanted to understand how she had developed such capabilities. Sarah considered her response carefully before speaking. "I've been fortunate to receive excellent instruction over the years. I've always taken shooting sports very seriously and have had access to quality training opportunities." Richardson realized that she was being deliberately evasive about her background. Her answers provided no real information while maintaining the pretense of civilian status. His suspicions about hidden professional experience were becoming stronger. "What specific training opportunities?" he demanded. "Who were your instructors? Where did you develop tactical skills that rival our special operations personnel?" The tension in the group was becoming apparent. Richardson's aggressive questioning was making everyone uncomfortable, but his frustration with Sarah's evasive answers was mounting. Sarah maintained her calm demeanor despite Richardson's increasingly confrontational tone. "I understand your curiosity, Colonel. I've been privileged to learn from many excellent instructors over the years. Some were retired military personnel who taught civilian shooting courses." "Retired military personnel don't teach combat simulation tactics to civilian hobbyists," Richardson snapped. "Your performance today demonstrated knowledge and skills that are classified at the highest levels of military training." Morrison stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Sir, perhaps we should discuss this in a more private setting." Richardson ignored Morrison's suggestion, his frustration now overriding his judgment. "I want answers, Miss Chen. Your documentation may be legitimate, but your capabilities suggest a background that you're deliberately concealing. The assembled SEALs were watching this confrontation with obvious discomfort. Richardson was putting their guest in an awkward position while making unfounded accusations about her honesty. Sarah remained calm despite Richardson's aggressive questioning. "Colonel, I understand your concerns. My documentation is complete and legitimate. I'm simply a civilian who enjoys shooting sports and has been fortunate to receive quality instruction." Richardson's face was flushing with anger and frustration. The woman had systematically outperformed his elite personnel while maintaining a civilian cover story that he found impossible to believe. "This is unacceptable," he declared loudly. "I will not have my facility used for deceptive demonstrations by individuals with hidden agendas. Your performance today proves that you have professional military or law enforcement background that you're concealing." The confrontation was escalating beyond professional disagreement into personal accusations. Morrison and his SEALs were clearly uncomfortable with Richardson's behavior, but they were unsure how to intervene. Sarah's response would determine whether this situation could be resolved professionally or would deteriorate into a serious incident that could have consequences for everyone involved. Richardson had pushed the confrontation to a point where peaceful resolution was becoming difficult. The stage was set for a revelation that would either vindicate Richardson's suspicions or expose his poor judgment in front of the military personnel he was supposed to lead. Either outcome would have significant consequences for his credibility and authority. The tension on the shooting range had reached a breaking point. Colonel Richardson stood facing Sarah with obvious anger and frustration, while the assembled SEALs watched the confrontation with growing discomfort. Morrison realized that the situation was deteriorating rapidly and needed immediate intervention. "Colonel," Morrison said firmly, "perhaps we should step aside and discuss this privately." Richardson's face was flushed with emotion as he turned to Morrison. "I will not be made a fool of by some civilian with a fake identity. This woman's performance today is impossible without extensive military training, and I demand to know the truth." Sarah maintained her calm composure despite the increasingly hostile atmosphere. She had remained polite and respectful throughout Richardson's accusations, but her patience was clearly being tested. "Colonel Richardson," she said quietly, "I understand your confusion about my background. Perhaps it would be helpful if I provided some additional context about my experience." Richardson seized on this opportunity. "Absolutely. I want complete disclosure about your professional background, training history, and the real purpose of your presence at this facility." The SEALs formed a loose circle around the confrontation, uncertain whether to intervene or simply observe. They were witnessing their liaison officer making serious accusations against a civilian guest with legitimate authorization. Sarah reached into her backpack and withdrew a leather folder that she had not previously opened. Richardson's eyes fixed on the folder with intense curiosity, hoping it would finally provide the answers he demanded. "Before I share this information," Sarah said carefully, "I need to explain why I initially provided only basic documentation. My complete background involves classified information that isn't normally disclosed in civilian settings." Richardson's anger began to mix with vindication. He had been correct that Sarah was concealing important information about her identity and experience. His confrontational approach was finally producing results. "I knew it," he said triumphantly. "You've been lying about your civilian status from the beginning. What's your real classification and assignment?" Sarah opened the leather folder and removed several documents. The papers appeared to be official military credentials, but Richardson couldn't read the details from his position. "I hold the rank of colonel in the United States Army," Sarah said quietly. "I'm currently assigned to the Army Marksmanship Unit as the senior instructor for advanced precision shooting programs." Richardson's expression shifted from triumph to confusion. If Sarah was a military colonel, her presence at the facility made sense, but it raised new questions about why she had initially presented civilian documentation. Morrison stepped forward to examine the credentials. His expression immediately changed to one of recognition and respect. "Ma'am, I apologize for any confusion. We weren't informed that you would be conducting an evaluation in civilian attire." "Wait," Richardson interjected, his confusion growing. If you're a military colonel, why did you present civilian documentation? Why the deception about your status? Sarah carefully returned the credentials to her folder before responding. I wasn't conducting a deception, Colonel Richardson. I was conducting a legitimate evaluation of your training facility using approved protocols. Richardson's mind raced to process this new information. If Sarah was conducting an official evaluation, it explained her authorization and access to classified information. However, it raised serious questions about his own behavior during the demonstration. What kind of evaluation? He asked cautiously. Sarah's expression became more serious as she prepared to explain the true purpose of her visit. The Pentagon is considering this facility for inclusion in a new cross-service training program. My mission was to evaluate the quality of instruction, equipment, and personnel at various special operations facilities. Morrison's face paled as he realized the implications. A senior Army marksmanship instructor had been evaluating their facility, while Richardson had been treating her as an unwelcome civilian intruder. The evaluation process requires observing how personnel respond to unexpected situations and challenges, Sarah continued. Presenting myself as a civilian allowed for a more accurate assessment of your facility's procedures and personnel attitudes. Richardson felt a growing sense of dread as he understood what had occurred. He had been evaluated throughout the entire demonstration, and his performance had been woefully inadequate. His treatment of Sarah would certainly be included in her official report. Ma'am, Morrison said respectfully, if we had known you were conducting an evaluation, we would have prepared appropriate protocols and briefings. Sarah smiled slightly. That would have defeated the purpose of the evaluation, Lieutenant Commander. The Pentagon needs to understand how facilities operate under normal conditions, not during carefully orchestrated demonstrations. The assembled SEALs were beginning to understand the situation. Their facility had been under evaluation, and they had witnessed their liaison officer embarrass himself in front of a senior Army instructor. Richardson's anger had transformed into embarrassment and growing panic. His confrontational behavior toward a superior officer conducting an official evaluation would have serious consequences for his career. Colonel Chen, he said formally, I apologize for any misunderstanding about your status. However, your initial documentation clearly identified you as a civilian. Sarah nodded. The documentation was accurate, Colonel. I was present in a civilian evaluation capacity, authorized by the highest levels of Pentagon leadership. My military status is separate from my evaluation mission. Richardson was struggling to understand the distinction. If Sarah was both a military officer and a civilian evaluator, the protocols for interaction became extremely complex. The evaluation process is designed to assess how military personnel interact with authorized civilians who possess advanced capabilities, Sarah explained. Many of our potential coalition partners and contractors have skills that rival military personnel. Morrison was beginning to appreciate the sophistication of the evaluation process. The Pentagon was testing not just technical capabilities, but also attitudes and professional behavior toward non-military personnel. Your performance today, Colonel Richardson, provides valuable data about how military personnel respond when their assumptions about civilian capabilities are challenged, Sarah continued. Richardson realized that every word he had spoken and every action he had taken was being evaluated for inclusion in an official Pentagon report. His behavior had been unprofessional and would likely result in serious career consequences. What specific aspects of the facility are you evaluating? Morrison asked, attempting to salvage the situation. Sarah consulted a small notebook. Equipment quality, safety protocols, instruction methods, personnel professionalism, and adaptability to unconventional situations. The Pentagon needs facilities that can accommodate diverse training requirements. Richardson's mind was racing as he considered the implications of Sarah's evaluation. His facility was being considered for inclusion in a prestigious cross-service program, but his poor performance might eliminate that opportunity. The combat simulation course was particularly impressive, Sarah noted. The design and execution demonstrate sophisticated understanding of stress inoculation and tactical training principles. Morrison felt some relief that the technical aspects of their facility were receiving positive evaluation. even if Richardson's behavior had been problematic. However, Sarah continued, personnel reactions to unexpected situations revealed some areas that require improvement. Professional military personnel should maintain composure and judgment when confronted with unfamiliar circumstances. Richardson knew that this comment was directed specifically at his behavior. He had failed the evaluation in the most fundamental way by allowing his assumptions and prejudices to override his professional judgment. "What recommendations will you be making to the Pentagon?" Richardson asked, dreading the answer. Sarah considered her response carefully. The technical capabilities of this facility are exceptional and would support the cross-service training program effectively. However, personnel selection and attitude training may require additional attention. The assembled SEALs understood that Richardson's behavior had potentially compromised their facility's selection for the prestigious program. Their opportunities for advanced training and career development might be affected by his poor judgment. "Is there any way to address the personnel concerns you've identified?" Morrison asked hopefully. Sarah looked directly at Richardson before responding. "Professional growth is always possible when individuals recognize their limitations and commit to improvement. Military effectiveness depends on adaptability and respect for capability regardless of its source." Richardson realized that Sarah was offering him an opportunity for redemption. If he could demonstrate genuine professional growth, it might mitigate the negative aspects of her evaluation. "Colonel Chen," he said formally, "I recognize that my behavior today was inappropriate and unprofessional. I allowed personal assumptions to override my military judgment, and I apologize for my conduct." Sarah nodded acknowledgement. "Recognizing mistakes is the first step toward improvement, Colonel. The military's greatest strength is our ability to learn from experience and adapt our approaches." Morrison sensed an opportunity to salvage the evaluation. "Ma'am, would it be possible to demonstrate our normal training protocols without the evaluation pressures? Our personnel are highly professional when operating under standard conditions." "That's an interesting suggestion," Sarah replied. "Additional observation might provide a more complete picture of your facility's capabilities and personnel standards." Richardson realized that he was being offered a second chance to demonstrate professional competence. The opportunity might allow him to partially redeem himself and protect his facility's evaluation. "I would welcome the opportunity to demonstrate our standard procedures and protocols," Richardson said carefully. "Our personnel are capable of much higher performance standards than I displayed today." Sarah consulted her notebook again. "Extended evaluation would require authorization from my superiors, but it might be beneficial for comprehensive assessment." The possibility of redemption energized both Richardson and Morrison. They had witnessed the consequences of poor judgment and were determined to demonstrate their true capabilities. "In the meantime," Sarah continued, "I'll be completing my initial evaluation report. The final recommendations will depend on multiple factors, including demonstrated ability to learn from feedback." Richardson understood that his future actions would be critical. Sarah's evaluation could either destroy his career or provide opportunities for professional growth, depending on how he responded to this experience. The revelation of Sarah's true identity had transformed the entire situation. What had begun as a simple facility tour had become a comprehensive evaluation with significant consequences for everyone involved. The final outcome would depend on how well they could demonstrate their ability to learn from this experience and adapt their approaches accordingly. The stage was set for a final demonstration that would determine whether Richardson could salvage his reputation and protect his facility's future opportunities. Sarah's evaluation had revealed fundamental problems, but it had also provided a roadmap for improvement if they were willing to embrace the lessons learned. 3 days later, Colonel Richardson stood in his office reviewing the preliminary evaluation report that Sarah had provided as a professional courtesy. The document was comprehensive and painfully honest about his performance during the initial demonstration. However, it also outlined specific recommendations for improvement that offered hope for redemption. The report praised the technical capabilities of the facility, the professionalism of the SEAL personnel, and the quality of the training equipment. Morrison and his team had received excellent ratings for their adaptability and professional conduct throughout the evaluation process. Richardson's personal evaluation was more complex. Sarah had documented his initial prejudices and confrontational behavior, but had also noted his willingness to acknowledge mistakes and commit to improvement. The final assessment would depend on his actions during the extended evaluation period. Sarah had returned to the facility in full military uniform, eliminating any confusion about her status or authority. The SEALs treated her with the respect due a senior officer, and her interactions with the facility personnel had been entirely professional. "Colonel Richardson," his aide announced over the intercom, "Colonel Chen is here for the final evaluation session." Richardson straightened his uniform and checked his appearance one last time. The extended evaluation period had provided him with opportunities to demonstrate professional growth, but the final judgment remained in Sarah's hands. Sarah entered his office in dress uniform, her bearing reflecting the confidence and competence that Richardson had initially mistaken for civilian overconfidence. Her colonel's eagles gleamed on her shoulders, a reminder of the authority she wielded. "Colonel Chen," Richardson said formally, rising to attention, "thank you for agreeing to the extended evaluation period. I hope our additional demonstrations have provided a more accurate picture of our capabilities." Sarah took the offered seat and opened her evaluation folder. "The past 3 days have been very instructive, Colonel. Your facility personnel have demonstrated exceptional professionalism and adaptability." Richardson felt some relief at this positive assessment. Morrison and his SEALs had worked diligently to showcase their true capabilities, conducting training demonstrations that highlighted their expertise and teamwork. "More importantly," Sarah continued, "you've demonstrated genuine commitment to professional growth. Your willingness to examine your own assumptions and modify your behavior shows the type of leadership that the cross-service program requires." Richardson had spent considerable time reflecting on his initial behavior and its underlying causes. He had realized that his prejudices about civilian capabilities had been based on limited experience and outdated assumptions. "I've learned some important lessons about judgment and professional conduct," Richardson admitted. "My initial reaction to your presence reflected poorly on my leadership and the standards of this facility." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Recognizing our limitations is essential for military effectiveness. The modern battlefield requires collaboration with diverse partners, including civilians with specialized capabilities." The extended evaluation had included demonstrations of inter-service cooperation, civilian contractor integration, and coalition training scenarios. Richardson had approached these exercises with a more open mindset and had achieved significantly better results. "Your facility will be recommended for inclusion in the cross-service training program," Sarah announced. "The technical capabilities and personnel quality meet all requirements for advanced special operations training." Richardson felt a wave of relief and gratitude. Despite his initial poor performance, the facility's selection would provide enormous opportunities for his personnel and advance his own career prospects. "However," Sarah continued, "the program will require specific personnel training focused on professional attitudes and collaboration skills. Some of your staff will need additional development before they can effectively support diverse training requirements." Richardson accepted this condition readily. Personnel training was a small price to pay for inclusion in the prestigious program, and the focus on professional development would benefit everyone involved. "I'll personally oversee the implementation of any required training programs," Richardson assured her. "We're committed to meeting the highest standards of professional conduct and collaboration." Sarah made notes in her evaluation folder. "The training will focus on cultural sensitivity, civilian integration protocols, and adaptive leadership techniques. These skills are essential for modern military operations." Richardson realized that the evaluation experience had provided him with insights that would benefit his career long-term. His narrow perspective on military superiority had been replaced by a more nuanced understanding of capability and professionalism. "Colonel Chen," he said carefully, "I want to apologize again for my initial behavior. Your demonstration taught me valuable lessons about assumption and judgment that I should have learned years ago." Sarah closed her evaluation folder and looked directly at Richardson. "Your willingness to learn from the experience speaks well of your character, Colonel. Military leadership requires the humility to acknowledge when we're wrong and the courage to change. Richardson felt that he had passed a test that extended far beyond the technical requirements of the facility evaluation. He had been forced to confront his own limitations and had emerged as a better leader. The cross-service program will bring diverse personnel to your facility, Sarah explained. You'll be working with special operations personnel from all services, civilian contractors, and international coalition partners. This diversity would require exactly the type of open-minded leadership that Richardson had been forced to develop during the evaluation process. His experience with Sarah had prepared him for the challenges ahead. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to participate in the program," Richardson said. "The lessons learned during this evaluation will help me provide better leadership for diverse training requirements." Sarah stood and prepared to leave. The formal notification will arrive through official channels within the next week. Implementation of the program will begin within 60 days. Richardson rose to escort her to the door. "Thank you for the professional manner in which you conducted this evaluation. Your approach provided opportunities for learning rather than simple criticism." As they walked through the facility, Richardson noticed that the SEAL personnel treated Sarah with obvious respect and admiration. Her demonstration had earned their professional regard in ways that command authority alone could never achieve. Morrison approached as they reached the main entrance. "Colonel Chen, the entire team wants to thank you for the training opportunities you provided. We learned as much from watching your demonstrations as from our regular instruction." Sarah smiled genuinely. "Outstanding personnel make any demonstration possible. Your facility has exceptional people who deserve the opportunities this program will provide." The SEALs had gathered to bid farewell to Sarah, clearly appreciative of the learning experience she had provided. Several had requested additional information about advanced marksmanship techniques and training methodologies. "Ma'am," one of the SEALs said, "would it be possible to arrange additional training sessions once the program is implemented? Your instruction methods could benefit our entire unit." Sarah considered the request thoughtfully. "The program will include advanced instructor development courses. Some of your personnel might be selected for specialized training that they could then share with the unit." This possibility excited the SEALs, who recognized the value of the advanced techniques that Sarah had demonstrated. The program would provide access to training that had previously been unavailable to their unit. Richardson watched this interaction with newfound appreciation. Sarah's expertise was being offered as an opportunity for his personnel rather than a criticism of their capabilities. Her approach fostered improvement rather than competition. "Colonel Richardson," Sarah said as she prepared to depart, "your facility has exceptional potential. The personnel quality and training capabilities will make valuable contributions to the cross-service program." Richardson felt proud of his facility and personnel while remaining humble about his own role in their success. The evaluation had taught him to recognize and appreciate capabilities wherever they existed. "We look forward to supporting the program and learning from the diverse expertise it will bring to our facility," Richardson replied. As Sarah departed, Richardson reflected on the transformation that had occurred over the past few days. His initial arrogance and prejudice had been replaced by professional humility and openness to learning. Morrison joined him as they watched Sarah's vehicle disappear down the base road. "Sir, that was quite an experience. She certainly knew how to make her point about capability and judgment." Richardson nodded thoughtfully. "She demonstrated that excellence can come from unexpected sources and that our job as leaders is to recognize and support it rather than feel threatened by it." The lessons learned during Sarah's evaluation would influence Richardson's leadership approach for the remainder of his career. He had discovered that true military professionalism required the confidence to acknowledge superior capability regardless of its source. "The cross-service program will bring similar challenges," Richardson mused. "We'll be working with people whose backgrounds and approaches differ from our own traditions." Morrison understood the implication. The facility's success in the program would depend on their ability to maintain the open-minded professionalism that Sarah had helped them develop. "Sir, the team is excited about the opportunities ahead. The training we'll receive and provide will make us better operators and instructors." Richardson felt optimistic about the future. The evaluation experience had been humbling but ultimately beneficial, providing insights and opportunities that would advance everyone's career prospects. The facility's selection for the cross-service program represented a significant achievement that would bring prestige, advanced training, and diverse experience to his personnel. More importantly, Richardson had learned leadership lessons that would serve him well in future assignments. As he returned to his office, Richardson realized that Sarah's visit had been transformative in ways that extended far beyond the formal evaluation. She had forced him to confront his limitations and had provided a roadmap for professional growth. The woman who had initially appeared to be an unwelcome civilian intruder had proven to be exactly what his facility needed: a catalyst for improvement and a reminder that military excellence required constant learning and adaptation. Richardson's assumption that civilian capabilities were inherently inferior to military training had been completely overturned. Sarah had demonstrated that expertise and professionalism could develop through various paths, and that the military's strength lay in its ability to recognize and integrate diverse capabilities. The experience had taught him that true leadership required the wisdom to admit mistakes, the humility to learn from others, and the courage to change long-held beliefs when evidence proved them wrong. These lessons would serve him well in the challenging assignments ahead. The shooting range demonstration that had begun with mockery and prejudice had concluded with mutual respect and professional growth. Richardson had learned that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources, and that his role as a leader was to foster rather than obstruct such capability. The cross-service program would provide ongoing opportunities to apply these lessons while supporting the development of diverse military capabilities. Richardson looked forward to these challenges with newfound confidence in his ability to lead effectively in complex, multifaceted environments. Sarah's evaluation had accomplished far more than measuring facility capabilities. It had created better leaders and more effective military personnel who understood that strength came through collaboration and mutual respect rather than competition and prejudice.